Well, I've told you for a long time that it's always possible crime can spread beyond its core location. And that's exactly what we're seeing now in parts of the Kansas City region. Welcome in. Good morning. It is great to be here on KCMO. Big day ahead. We got a presidential candidate coming on in just over an hour. I'll tell you about that coming up in the next 15 minutes on KCMO Talk Radio. But this stood out to me last night as I was watching our local news. I'm looking at the story on Fox 4, and it's talking about how Weatherby Lake, beautiful neighborhood up north in Platte County, is getting targeted by criminals. And, you know, mostly due to things like unlocked cars, garages, especially at night. But it's a continuation of burglaries across Platte County. Over the summer, we told you about some issues in rural Platte County where crime was on the rise. And people need to be mindful of consistently doing the basics, locking their doors, keeping valuables out of sight. Because as parts of our region continue to have severe issues with crime, not just homicides, but crime across the board, it is always likely to spread. And that's exactly what's happening in this situation. By the way, it's not unique to Platte. We've seen some of that in Johnson County as well, by the way. But Platte County has certainly been a target as Platte County has continued to grow in recent years. So Fox 4 was on the case last night. They had a reporter up there at Weatherby Lake. Here's what he had to say.
But nearby, Denny Scheck, who says his son's truck was stolen nearby not too long ago, he says the increase in burglaries has him a little more on edge, mostly out of concern about desperate individuals.
I'm not going to worry about my truck. I only worry about me and my wife. You know what I mean? You know, it's like the old saying. If it didn't happen to you, it's okay. But if it happens to you, then it's too late. Do everything you can. Watch out for the neighbors.
Burglaries have been a somewhat common issue in the Northland this year, with similar activity cropping up in nearby rural Platte County over the summer, and those homes certainly not as densely packed as they are out here.
That was from Fox 4 on their newscast last night. So they're up there at Weatherby Lake, and, you know, they're dealing with some of this, what we would call, I guess, petty crime, but it still is problematic. It's still an issue that is only going to spread. And you've got great folks up in Platte County. Eric Zond is the prosecutor there. He's going to be on the show coming up at 8:30 this morning. But I'm sitting back, I'm looking at this, and I'm saying to myself, as we've talked about for years, if the crime in the major cities spiral out of control, it is always going to be likely to spread. That's how this goes. Meantime, speaking of Kansas City, we have 2.5 weeks until the end of the year. We are sitting right now at 174 homicides. The record in Kansas City, Missouri is 179. We are 5 away from breaking a record. 3 years ago at this time, in what was the deadliest year in Kansas City, Missouri history, we are exactly where we were at this point 3 years ago. In 2020, when the record was set, as of December 13th, last night, per the daily homicide analysis, Kansas City, Missouri was at 174 homicides. And, you know, just so we're all on the same page here, too, in terms of who's losing their lives, because all this data is available courtesy of KCPD. We're talking about well over 50% of the victims here are under the age of 34. 18 victims are under the age of 18 this year. A combined 60 of the victims are under the age of 24. We are losing the youngest people, the people with futures, theoretically, in Kansas City, Missouri, who are losing their lives at a record-setting pace due to homicides. And I'm sure there'll be a headline if, God forbid, and geez, I mean, I hope we don't, but if, God forbid, that record is broken, if, God forbid, we get to that number of 180 There'll be a news article, there'll be a story about it, but nothing's going to happen. No one's going to do anything. There might be some faux outrage. There might be some balloon parties, but nothing of substance is going to happen. You're going to have people in Kansas City that are going to scream about how if only they had local control, everything would be fine. Life would be good. We would solve this. We'd be under 100 homicides if we just had our local control of the police department. You've got a three-prong issue here. A bad prosecutor, cops who are continuing to dwindle in the force. We're down 300 some odd cops in Kansas City, Missouri. And then, if you want to actually have a statewide issue about this, yeah, okay, there are some problems with the Second Amendment Preservation Act based on the law enforcement folks I've spoken with. But it's certainly in no way, shape, and form can anybody ever try to convince me that if only we gave the people who are running this city more control, everything would be okay. There's nothing to say. There is literally nothing to suggest that giving these people more power results in success and safety for the people of Kansas City. Nothing. Point to me something that you could point to and say, well, that's the reason I would trust them to have more control over law enforcement, especially based off of what they, tried to pull a couple of years ago on the defund, not really defund, kind of defund, okay, fine, defund attempt that they made that thankfully got smacked down by the legal system. You can't point to it. No one can. And that's okay because you know what? There's nothing that you can point to. 913-408-7957 as we get it rolling on a Thursday morning. The mayor of Kansas City, Quinton Lucas, will be here in his Thursday 7:30 slot. We got a lot to talk to him about this week, as we seemingly do each and every week here on the show. We do have a presidential candidate who is going to be on this program in just over 1 hour from now. We will tell you who that is, why we are excited about that conversation, coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Well, it's 6:18, and in 1 hour, Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to be here on this show after his fundraiser last night here in Kansas City. He had an event at the Uptown Theater at about 5:30 last night. He is leaving town this morning, and we were able to get him on the show at about 7:20 today. So 1 hour from now, you don't want to miss it. Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to be on KCMO Talk Radio. He was in Kansas City. He's trying to basically fundraise and get the signatures to get himself on all 50 states' ballots for the presidential race next year. Now, there's a lot that I disagree with Robert Kennedy Jr. on. I mean, whether it's his climate change ideas, some of his gun stances, reparations. I mean, there's plenty that we disagree on. But I think he's a pretty interesting guy because at least he's someone who is trying to bring something different to the table. He's trying to bring something different to the table from the standpoint of he's got some ideas that Republicans hate, and he's got some ideas that Democrats hate. Notably a stance on Fauci and COVID and things like that, John.
Yeah, running as an independent then, right?
Yes. So that's what it's very difficult to run as an independent in this environment because we know the power that both of these parties have. Like Trump was always never really a Republican, but Trump was smart in the sense that, well, he said, I'm going to run as a Republican and then remake the Republican Party essentially in my vision if I end up winning, which he obviously did. And now a lot of Donald Trump's ideas are part of the Republican Party platform when they wouldn't have been 15, 20, 25 years ago. But Kennedy's actually going for the whole independent thing. He's trying to run without the two major parties. And while there's a lot that I don't agree with him on, that I respect. Because the two-party system that we have right now is incredibly broken. we are getting weak candidates after weak candidates after weak candidates coming out of these primaries. And I'm not saying that about necessarily just the presidential race. I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about all the way down to county commissioner in Johnson, wherever. We are getting weaker candidates, it seems like, every single cycle. Now, maybe that's just not the fault of the two-party system. Maybe that's the fault of, the political climate and who the heck really wants to do this these days. That could be part of it as well. But the more options, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I put this up on social media last night, and some of you started freaking out about Robert Kennedy Jr. coming on this. He's going to take away votes from Trump.
He's a progressive from back east.
Well,
that old chant.
There was some of that. But, some of you were very enthusiastic about it. So that's the point. I'm just here to have on interesting people. That's it. That's the purpose of the show. Somebody said to me on Twitter, I thought this was a conservative talk station. Oh, I'm sorry that every voice that you hear on the station doesn't confirm every worldview that you have.
They're not in the club, Pete.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I mean, that's screw up by me.
How dare you?
Yeah, how dare I? No, that's not how this works.
You have an assignment out there when you're listening. It's your job to decide for yourself. We'll present you the information, Quentin Lucas, etc. Sometimes Cleaver's on. We've had Sharice David. We've had Laura Kelly on.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You hear them. You can determine. Pete's not going to tell you what to think about them.
No, you're smart. That's the thing. This audience, for the most part, is very smart.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have on people like RFK when they're in Kansas City doing fundraisers. And you're going to decide for yourself whether or not you like what you hear.
Yeah.
That's it. And he's going to be here at 7:20 this morning, so less than an hour away from Robert Kennedy Jr. being on this show. And if you got any questions, get them in on the text line, 913-408-7957, 913-408-7957. So that was it wasn't even a rant. I was just kind of giving a public service announcement before we get to the interview, before the text lines and phone lines start blowing up with complaints. I'll probably have a good rant after it's done, but for now, still in a good place.
I imagine, I almost guarantee that you will hear something you like out of his mouth.
I agree.
How about that?
10-minute interview.
Let's see if you can find it. Keep listening, right?
Yeah. You will find something you like. Hey, that's not a bad point there, Rob.
Well, right. The Fauci people are going to love it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Or anti-Fauci.
The Fauci haters will love that. No doubt about it.
Would that be Antifa?
And, I see what you did there.
Anti-foul.
So we just do the whole thing. Anti-Fauci. It's actually kind of rolls off the tongue nicely.
Yeah.
So I'm saving that. I'm hoping I don't have to build up to a bigger rant later in the show. But I might. I've been known to let one loose once in a while. So if I have to do it, I have to do it later in the show. But my real, not a rant, but I saw this on Fox Business yesterday. Southwest Airlines celebrated for policy to give a full row to passengers of size for free. Now, I'm getting set to fly again next week for the holidays. And I happen to be flying Southwest. At least I'm not doing JetBlue this time after my disastrous travel experiences with them over Thanksgiving. But, Southwest is good for families because you board after the A group. You can, put the family together. It works out pretty darn well. So Southwest is a good airline for families. And overall, I'll knock on wood as I say this, I've had good experience with them. But it says here, Southwest Airlines is being celebrated by passengers of size on TikTok after they discovered they can request complimentary seats, one or two, depending on the needs, to accommodate their girth. Customers whose bodies encroach past the armrest are entitled to an extra seat, according to Southwest's inclusion policy. They are currently one of the few, if not the only airline to offer free seats to larger passengers. Southwest provided its policy to Fox Business, which said that passengers of size, quote, have the option of purchasing just one seat and then discussing your seating needs with the customer service agent at the departure gate. If it's determined that a second or third seat is needed, you'll be accommodated with a complimentary additional seat. How could you need a whole row? If you need a whole row in an airplane, you're not fitting on the airplane, with all due respect.
Now, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, that movie? Something like that?
I mean, this is ridiculous.
I can't imagine that. It'd be hard to get on the plane if you needed that much room.
That's exactly right. You would need the wheelchair, and then you literally would not be able to get on the plane, I don't think, if you needed 3 seats. But this is the fact that we're sitting here in America, and yes, we are obese as Americans. Those are the facts. But now we're not only accepting it, we're almost encouraging it by saying, if you're fat, you're a victim, you could get a second seat courtesy of Southwest. You know what we should be doing? Why don't we have a national movement and a national conversation around how to start getting this damn country back into shape? We're all guilty of it to some degree, but that's where our conversation should be. Southwest, you know what? How about if you weigh, just like the bag policy, how about if you weigh, let's say, under $180 if you're a guy? I don't know what the female weight number would be, but if you're under $180 as a guy, depending on your height, of course, there's got to be some height to weight ratio. But let's figure out a height to weight ratio that you can get a discount on your ticket if you come in under the right height to weight ratio. What do we think about that? Instead of rewarding people for being overweight, how about we give people discounts on airplanes who are overweight, who are underweight, who are in shape? How about that for an idea? Something tells me it's not going to happen and it's not going to fly. But I really, really, really would like it to.
Seems equitable.
Yeah, it would be nice. Independent presidential hopeful Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to be here at 7:20, a half hour away. So make sure you're tuned in then. Stream it at KCMOTalkRadio.com if you're at the office by then, or download the KCMO Talk Radio app. Or, of course, 95.7 FM, the way to listen. So speaking of interviews on this radio station, yesterday, Ray Stevens had on Spencer Renfro, one of the owners of Johnny's, the one up north in Lawrence, after a lawsuit they filed against the city of Lawrence, which they claim will not take care and do anything about the incredible amount of homeless people hanging out behind their location there. So kudos to Ray Stevens, who, if you haven't listened to, you should, every day from 10 to noon on KCMO. He was able to track down Spencer Renfro. He had Spencer on the show to talk about this lawsuit and the issues they're dealing with at Johnny's in Lawrence. And it was worse than I expected in terms of how he described it. Spencer Renfro said yesterday here on KCMO that this has been worse than COVID.
It's been one of the longest years I've had in this business. I've been here about 10 years now, and going through COVID seemed easy compared to what we have to deal with on a daily basis. And a big part of it is the unknown, right? We're not really sure what kind of interactions we're going to have on a daily basis. We'll go 2, 3, 4 days without anything happening. And then, 11 o'clock on a Friday morning, we have to deal with a situation with one of the individuals out back or somebody else in town that is not following the laws and acting out of character.
So this is a city-sanctioned homeless camp in Lawrence that has provoked this lawsuit with business owners, including Johnny's, saying that more than a year later, the site that was supposed to be temporary is still standing. And the lawsuit also says the camps have spread beyond the fencing and legal borders set up by the city. So just how bad is it? Well, Spencer Renfro added to Ray Stevens yesterday just some of the issues they're dealing with. And it's horrible, especially when you think about the fact that there are a lot of young women who obviously work in restaurants, especially in a college town. And take a listen to some of the stuff they're dealing with.
Yes, there's a lot of people that are out of their minds on whatever drugs they're taking, and they come inside and want to use the restroom, and we politely ask them that they refrain from doing that, and then they throw a fit, and one of our hostess, who's 18 years old, has to deal with that or be right there and see that, and it just makes people uneasy. The kind of walkway they have to the camp is right in between our business and our parking lot. So we have a lot of interactions with staff and customers going to and from their cars. Most of the time, nothing happens and people walk right by each other, but you just never know when that person who might be on drugs is going to act erratically. So that's a big part of it, that mental strain of always having to be on your toes, always having to look behind your back and make sure that you're staying safe and can keep our customers safe.
Think about that. You got homeless people on who knows what kind of drugs that are out there walking into Johnny's, the one up north in Lawrence, and just trying to, hit the head. Hey, I got to go. Now, of course, they always say, no, you can't have homeless people just using your restrooms willy-nilly as they go to and from their tent behind your restaurant. You can't have that. But at the same time, it's like you're also putting your staff at risk because it only takes one of these people to fly off the handle, and then you've got your own employees in a potential life or death situation. That's not extreme. That is not extreme. It takes one homeless vagrant on drugs to fly off the handle because he or she, most likely he, cannot use your toilet, and then you've got a massive issue on your hands. And the city of Lawrence is nowhere to be found. I reached out to some of the council members yesterday, and I heard absolutely nothing back. Not a peep from these people. They haven't said a word back to me. And all I said is, hey, can you tell us what's going on there? What you guys are doing about it? How you're handling this as a city council? I didn't even get the old runaround of, well, we're going to let our legal team take care of this. I didn't get any of that. I just got no response. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, so who exactly do you represent? The taxpayer, the business owner, the college student who's trying to get a side job to pay the tuition at KU? Or are you standing up for the homeless person and for the woke activists who are like, these people deserve a place to live? Yeah, they do, but they don't deserve to try to ruin the livelihoods of small business owners and college kids who are just trying to make a buck to earn some beer money. That is not like a right. So I'm going to reach out again today. I'm going to try to get a hold of somebody on the city council, John, the mayor, someone, but I don't like my odds based on how it's gone here lately.
Well, you're also leaving some people to fend for themselves in that whole environment of, that deal. Yeah. Not everybody out there is depraved. There may be a few people got no place to go, and that's the only place they could go. Now they've got to fend for themselves in this whole new eco-structure or whatever I'm looking for. Politics, the whole thing. It's a whole new world.
It is.
Every man for himself, if you will.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on as well. 913-408-7957. We'll get to you. We've got Robert Kennedy Jr. at 7:20 this morning, 25 minutes away, less than that now, on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM.
Find dentist near me.
Right here, ma'am. How can I help?
Wow, no dentist near me? Really?
What? I'm right here. Ma'am, we're a local dentist literally right down the street from... Why is she not seeing us?
Oh, here's one. It's a bit far, but hey, they got good reviews.
What in the world? Hello? Can you not see us?
Nope. Because your business is buried deep in the list of local results and is, basically invisible. Get a boost with Cumulus Boost. Get found. Get on the map. Learn more at cumulusboost.com.
We are just over 10 minutes away from talking with Robert Kennedy Jr. He was in Kansas City last night for an event at the Uptown Theater. Of course, he's trying to get himself on all 50 ballots, state ballots across the country. And you know what? In an era when the two-party system appears to be failing, it's not that I'm convinced he's the answer or something like that. I think he's a very interesting guy. He's got viewpoints that really bother liberals, and he's got viewpoints that really bother conservatives. But if this is a small part of starting the conversation to more voices being part of the national conversation beyond the two-party system, I'm intrigued. And by the way, my brother's got a man crush on the guy. He loves RFK, and he's, I was going to say he's sub 30, but he's not anymore. He's 30, and that's a big part of RFK's appeal. He does very well with younger voters. Very well. And I'm going to ask him about that as well when he comes up here on KCMO Talk Radio. He's really the only guy. When you poll the youth, he knocks it out of the park. And I wonder why exactly that is. So he was at Uptown last night. He's going to be on the show in right about 10 minutes from now here on KCMO. So be listening or streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Mayor Lucas will be in his usual spot at 7:35. So speaking of things happening in Kansas City, yesterday it was reported that Kansas City police captain and the spouse, the husband of Police Chief Danny Graves, is retiring at the end of the year. Now, the police department says that this has been his plan all along. This has nothing to do with the fact that there was the whole kerfuffle around doing security for Taylor Swift at the Green Bay Packers game 2 Sundays ago. And I did confirm that last night, that this was always part of the plan. He was going to retire at the end of the year. Of course, some people are going to say, well, he's retiring because of some of the sideshow stuff with Taylor Swift. As I understand it, that's not true. He was going to retire. He was going to hang him up. His wife's the police chief here in Kansas City. And, it makes sense, to be honest. Guy's been on the job for, 25 years, give or take. And this is how it goes. A lot of guys in the public sector, gals in the public sector, typically retire at the end of the year. And as I understand it, it's basically because they have all this PTO and all these sick days they cash in on, and they want it to be in the new year for tax purposes. Someone tried to explain it to me once a little bit more in depth than that. I was like, whatever, I don't care. All I know is you guys got, all these payouts you get as public sector employees. God bless you for that. I'm not knocking you for it, but I understand. You retire at the end of the year, so then those payments come in the following year, and there are tax reasons, if you're a cop or you work in the public sector, to retire in December. And more importantly, as I understand it, Kansas City, Missouri is going to end up with about 85 retirements from the police department this year. How many people were hired by KCPD this year? Cops. 60. So when all is said and done, we're going to go into 2024 in this town as we approach a record number for homicides. We got 174 right now year to date. We're 6 away from breaking the record, which was set back in 2020. God willing, we won't, but we might. 6 away in the next 2.5 weeks. I hope we don't break it. I don't want to break it. I don't want this to be another year of record-setting homicides in this town, but it's very possible we end up getting that. So we're going to be down, when all is said and done, about 1,080 is going to be the number, give or take, of cops in 2024 in Kansas City, Missouri. As recently as 15 years ago, we had nearly 1,500 cops. A full force is about 1,412. So we'll be down well over 300 cops from where this town should be, from where this town needs to be. And that's going to be and should be a huge story, if not the biggest story in Kansas City going into 2024. I don't think it will be, because I don't think the media is going to do its job on this. I mean, if we break the record for homicides, there'll be a couple of news stories about it. It'll be, geez, gosh, I wish less people were getting killed on the streets. And then everyone's going to move on. But if you're a resident, if you're a taxpayer, and I don't care what part of town you're in, by the way, I don't care if you're in a high crime area or if you're in a perceived low crime area. Because even if you're in a perceived low crime area, eventually, whether it's you or neighbor, someone in your community is going to need a cop. And one of the problems of being down 350 law enforcement officers is that if you ever have to make that call, good luck getting somebody there in a reasonable amount of time. That is a fallout from being down basically 20% on your force from where you should be. And it's something that, a lot of people aren't thinking about right now as they wake up across Kansas City. But if you need that cop, you need somebody to show up, and you're down 20% from where you should be in a city, by the way, that is as large geographically as Kansas City, 320 square miles, the same size as New York City, by the way, geographically, with about a 16th of the people, but the same exact size. That's the kind of stuff that is going to continue to hurt Kansas City when it comes to its own growth going forward. Coming up next, Robert Kennedy Jr. He was at the Uptown Theater last night. He's leaving Kansas City today. He will join this show next, right here on 95.7 FM, and stream us on the KCMO Talk Radio app or at kcmotalkradio.com. Busy 7 o'clock hour. RFK Jr., if you missed it, about a half hour ago. And then Quentin Lucas, mayor of Kansas City, just now on KCMO. On the text line, 913-408-7957. Wow, Pete, I can't believe how much Quentin Lucas doesn't like RFK. In fact, he may have just secured my vote for RFK. This text,
see, that's what we talk about when you listen and you make your decision. Right?
Yes.
And bam.
I love that. I mean, I'd love it just because this person clearly didn't expect to feel the way they do after hearing the last half hour of the show.
Exactly. So if you just listen and make your own decision, we're presenting you the information.
Yeah. This texter writes here, if the left establishment dislikes him that much, he's got to be good for the country. I don't know. I'm just here to present the two folks and, let you decide. That's it. At 913-408-7957. But yeah, the Boston mayor, Michelle Wu, is certainly not dreaming of a white Christmas.
Boom.
Yeah.
See what you did there.
Hey, see what I did? Her staff sent out an invite to electeds of color for a holiday party, but they accidentally sent it to the entire city council, which has 7 whites and 6 minorities on it. So the thing blew up in their face, and the staffer, Denise, who is the mayor's director of city council relations, sent a follow-up email saying, I wanted to apologize for my previous email regarding a holiday party because the white councilors were not supposed to receive the invite. So the city council has 6 minorities and 7 whites on it, and needless to say, this thing has blown up in her face.
I think they're being presumptuous on who relates to being white.
Well, how exactly? Right? I mean, how
do we determine?
America's a melting pot. You might look white, but if you're, maybe, I don't know, an eighth, a quarter Native American, you might look white, even though you got some Native American blood in you. That happens all the time. So here's the best part, by the way. And I just retweeted the photo that is going viral at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, is married to a white dude. I kid you not.
Come.
She's married to a white dude. Her kids are half white, and she's not inviting white people. So her husband, if he was on the city council, would not be able to go to the holiday party that she made. Like, let me just.
Is your head going to explode?
My head's going to explode because imagine, let's go to Western Kansas, let's say, right? Let's go to, and I'm just going to say Garden City, Dodge, I don't know. I'm thinking some of the small towns I used to call football games and out there, Meade, Kansas, wherever you want to go out there. Let's say the city council, 10 people. Let's say there was like 8 whites and 1 black and 1 Asian. And the mayor of the town said, we're having a whites-only holiday party. That would be national news. People who don't even know where Meade, Kansas is on a map would be flood. NBC News would do the freaking Today Show from Meade, Kansas to talk about how racist it is.
Daily Mirror would shift from Kelsey's driveway and move out there and get to cover that story.
Oh, yeah. They'd be all over it. They'd be all over it. But instead, mayor of Boston, supposedly one of the most advanced cities in this country. Everyone there is going to Harvard, going to all these fancy schools, MIT, highly educated population base. You got a mayor who's like, if you're a person of color, and white also apparently isn't a color. Once again, I'm just confused by the whole thing. You get to come to the holiday party, and if not, well, guess what? You're not coming to the holiday party. That is nuts. And it should be getting so much more attention beyond just like the New York Post where I happen to see it, and then social media is blowing up. But the cable news, Today's Show, Good Morning America, no. They're not going to touch on that. Because racism, of course, only works one way. When it should work all ways. Racism should be applied equally when it happens. But, of course, it doesn't. 913-408-7957. News coming up in a couple of minutes. We've got you as we hit the 8 o'clock hour, plus Elon Musk doing something really interesting we'll tell you about next hour. Very interesting as your feedback continues to come in on the text line on our conversation last hour with Robert Kennedy Jr., who was in Kansas City last night for a fundraiser. He's trying to get himself on all the ballots across the country, including in Missouri. He's trying to get those signatures at Kennedy24.com. He says it's going to cost him $15 million to get on all 50 ballots. But the big part of the conversation was why young people like him. New York Times poll here in the last few weeks had him leading Biden and Trump in voters under 45 in swing states. Is that really because of his stance, or is that because of dislike of the two-party system and perceived failures of the two-party system? On the text line, Pete, I wanted to call in, but I can't. I know why young people like RFK Jr. He comes off as genuine. There are so many fake things in the world today. Fake food, fake news, fake women, fake men. Young people just want to grasp onto something that is real. Well, I don't know what's real and what's not real. It's hard to decipher that these days. But genuine, that is certainly a trait that is lost, especially with politicians. I mean, I'm all over the place across the board. You know, it's so true. But RFK is, I mean, I'm telling you, I'm an older millennial, but I have, younger siblings and things like that, and they love this guy.
I like the word genuine rather than real. Bernie Sanders is real.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's genuine.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, it's a fine line. But they don't watch Fox News. They don't watch CNN. They're not watching this stuff, but they're watching Joe Rogan. They're listening to guys like that. And they're going on YouTube and they're seeing RFK. And, they're much more difficult to put into the bucket of Republican or Democrat. Now, there's no doubt RFK has some ideas that I completely disagree with. He's open to the idea of reparations, which is insanity. He's very much into extreme public policy around climate change. We know climate change is happening, but how much are you going to change your economy to try to prevent it, especially when India and China are burning fossil fuel left and right and doing way more damage to the climate than we'll ever do? How much are you going to set yourself back behind, especially China, in the name of climate change? All those things ring true as well. So these are all different parts of the equation and parts of the conversation that, to me, make him interesting and make him someone worthy of at least hearing from. I'm not here to tell you who the right guy is, who the wrong guy is. I don't. That's not my job. I'm just here to have interesting conversations. And RFK certainly brought that to the table last hour. If you missed it, it will be up on the podcast after the show. Victor Parkville is first up in the 8 o'clock hour. Victor, good morning.
Good morning, Pete. First, it was difficult to actually understand him at times, and I understand the speech impediment is not has anything to do with his mental capacity. It's very difficult for him to communicate as well as I'd like to. But I think one of the reasons that so many of these 45 and unders like him is because that's where most of your low information or no information voters are. I mean, these are the voters that think that we can run our economy on wind farms and solar panels, and everybody can drive electric cars and live in harmony with their enemy, and everybody just so they got this ideological thinking that he's going to be able to accomplish half the crap that he thinks he can, and that's just not going to happen. I mean,
see,
I
think you're doing a disservice, though, because here's the thing. Under 45, you're not watching cable news. Over 45, you are. And whatever you think of various news sources, you ain't learning much from cable news these days either. And if these kids are listening to hour-long podcasts on Joe Rogan, and I say kids, I mean, if younger people are listening to hour-long podcasts of Joe Rogan, I don't know. You're going to learn a thing or two. You might not agree, but you might learn a thing or two.
Okay, and that's a small percentage of the population under 45. How much of that population between 18 and 25 are getting their news from TikTok?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's. I mean, and actually, here's the thing: who's going to go out and vote? That's where your population really matters. Your population skew really matters. Is who's going to actually get out and vote? And it's not going to be your low information, no information voter that's 45 and under. I mean, they're a significant part of the population, but they're not that educated. They're not that motivated, and they're too utopian ideologically. It's just not going to happen. He's just going to be a spoiler for both sides, and I think he's going to be a spoiler more for Joe than he is for Don, and that's just kind of the way it goes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Victor. 913-408-7957. I agree this year he ends up, if he makes it on the ballot in 50 states, most likely just playing spoiler. I don't know which one it's to. That I'm not sure of, because I got a lot of people on my Facebook page who are convinced that he's going to play spoiler to Trump. And I had him on because I don't want Donald Trump to win. I'm secretly part of the Biden, whatever. It's like, no, you're looking into it way too much. I promise you are. I just thought, hey, he was in Kansas City last night. He's worth having on. But what I think Victor's missing, in fairness, and I say this with all due respect, the younger voter believes both parties have failed them. And RFK spoke to that. The young voter who is sitting in tens of thousands of dollars in debt because they went to college, because they were told they had to go to college, because they had to get a college degree. And now they're realizing, gosh, that thing didn't really do nearly as much for me as, the previous generation told me it would. Now, that's not to say that we should bail out their student loans or anything like that. You know how I feel about that. But they feel like the entire system has failed them in a way that it didn't fail the baby boomer generation. We talked with RFK about the housing crisis. The fact that right now, young people are competing against BlackRock to buy a house. That's insane. They feel like the American dream is dead to them in a way that it was not for prior generations. I don't think it's as much about RFK's specific policies, because he's kind of all over the map. It's more about the fact that younger people feel like they have said as much in polls. They don't feel like they will achieve the success of their parents' generation. And that's the first time in modern American history a generation has felt that way. And they blame the politicians, and they blame both parties for it. Whether that's right or wrong is a different conversation. But that's the emotional, visceral feeling that many millennials and a lot of Gen Z, more and more of Gen Z, has every single day.
I'm not old enough to forget what it was like when I was young, right? And so when you're a younger generation, you kind of want to maybe rebel. You want something different than that. And my generation was like, oh, my God, the nukes. We're not going to be safe. The Russians have got them pointed. It's always something is what I guess I'm saying here for the younger generation. So you tend to feel disenfranchised from the previous generation, and you're looking for something different. And we can complain about it, but things are the way they are, right?
But here's what I would say, too. Like, Reagan won 49 states in 84. Mm-hmm. So there at least was some agreement across America amongst all generations of what the way forward was. Mm-hmm. Now it is a cluster, you know what. I mean, Biden and Trump are split in a head-to-head. Young people like RFK, he's just playing spoiler. I will agree with that in a general election, theoretically. For which guy, I don't know. But it is a lot different from where we were 35, 40 years ago when you talk about what the mindset is for all Americans right now and what the best way forward is. Coming up, Elon Musk talking about upsetting the apple cart. He may very well be upsetting higher education for the better. It's a great idea. This announcement came down yesterday. I'm a huge proponent of it. We talk a lot about higher ed, what's happening on our college campuses. Elon Musk may be blowing the whole system up. We'll tell you how next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. The monopoly that is higher education and education in general, we know needs a shakeup. And Elon Musk may be leading the way on helping solve the problem in the very early stages. So this came down yesterday. The Tesla CEO is opening up a new university in Austin, Texas. Texas Transplant, of course, there are Tesla plants down there in Austin. Elon Musk is planning to start a university in Austin, according to tax filings for one of his charities, first reported by Bloomberg News. The charity, called the Foundation, plans to use a $100 million gift from Musk to create and launch a primary and secondary school in Austin focused on teaching science, technology, engineering, and math, a.k.a. STEM. Wow, there's a novel concept, teaching our kids about STEM. There's the acronym we should be using instead of DEI. Once it's fully operational, the filing states, the school will focus on creating a university. The school intends to seek accreditation by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, a necessary first step to launch the school. This is awesome. This is exactly what we need at this exact moment in time. Elon Musk, when we're all gone, we may look back on this point in history as Elon Musk being one of the most important people beyond any politician that is living on planet Earth today. He buys Twitter, now X. He maintains the free speech platform that, frankly, it always should have been, but it wasn't until Elon bought it. It's supposed to be the town square, whether you like it or you hate it. It's not about what I agree with, what you agree with. It was supposed to be the town square of free speech. It wasn't at the end. Elon's brought that back. Now you look at some of what he's doing here with ideas like this, potentially upending the monopoly that is education in this country, unless, of course, you have money and you can pay for your kids to go to private school. That's the irony. People who scream about public schools oftentimes aren't even sending their kids to them, right? The biggest supporters of public schools, including Governor Kelly, kids didn't go to public school. And you can find examples like that across the country. The most prominent public school defenders' own children go to private schools. But anyway, Elon Musk could be the guy that upends all this. So according to the filing, the university would teach students in person as well as using distance education technologies. It expects to start enrollment with 50 students and scale up over time. The school would fund its activities through donations and tuition fees. Though the filing also states that if a student cannot pay tuition or fees, the school could provide financial aid. It's currently hiring an executive director, teachers, and administrators. So it looks like this will start as basically secondary education and then potentially move into a college. And I hope that it happens sooner rather than later, because this is the kind of stuff that has to happen. We have to increase this kind of supply of alternative education to then make it more competitive with the monopoly that currently exists. I'm all about it. And I know some of you are going to say, well, how is this different from a private school? Like, what makes this different, let's say, from a private school where there's going to be tuition, maybe you get some monies for financial aid if you need it? Well, it's more about what's being taught. Think about this. And those of you who are homeschoolers will know this because I've heard this from many of you. For people that homeschool, like the actual work that needs to be done is 3 to 4 hours a day. But kids are in schools for 7 to 8 hours a day. Ask yourself why. What's the purpose? What's the point? Is it because it's become, in some cases, basically glorified daycare? I mean, that's not what it's intended to be. And then when you get into what's actually being taught and the principles that are being pushed, Elon Musk is saying, we want to keep up with China. We want to remain the world's superpower. And what we have to do is get our kids advanced and caught up on STEM. I mean, how many people do we have, by the way, coming to this country who are coming in legally? You know, they've got their visas. They're doing all that. They're doing it the right way. But they're coming here because we have a shortage of people who are really involved in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. They're coming from all over the country, or all over the world, to this country because we have a shortage of that. Because instead of producing people who are experts in science, technology, engineering, and math, we've got people who are experts in gender studies. That's what we're creating. That's what we're developing in this country. What is that all about? That doesn't make an ounce of sense. So if we're going to get back to focusing on this, and by the way, one of the dumbest things colleges do, you got to go for 4 years. You got to take elective courses, that have nothing to do with what you're going to end up doing in life. So they can make more money and they can potentially indoctrinate to some degree. Those days should be over. You should be able to go to a college of your choice, whatever the college is. And if you can take the courses that you need to take to prepare yourself for the real world, whatever you want to do, then get it done. This whole 30 credits per semester. Don't forget, John, you got to take, your course on geology, or else you're not going to get your nice piece of paper and your degree and walk across that stage.
Yeah, I had to take structure of the universe.
Oh, did you really?
No, I was going to say, it's kind of interesting and common where we're at. STEM, science and tech, what was it again?
Science, technology, engineering, math.
Right. That used to just be called school because that's what you taught there, right?
Yeah.
Now it's a unique concept with an acronym.
Yeah.
Come on.
That is a great point. It's crazy how that now needs to, everything's an acronym now.
Yeah.
It's just making sure you pick the right acronyms. I like STEM with Elon Musk's college that he's developing in Austin, Texas, much more than DEI.
Boom.
There you go. We are having issues in Platte County when it comes to crime. Weatherby Lake, the latest on the news last night about crime happening there, but it's all across Platte. Eric Zond is the Platte County prosecutor. He's on KCMO coming up next.